I'm so excited that you all have joined the career exploration session for healthcare. Some of you may have joined the consulting one. We've had one for finance. And then we will continue to do these as the summer goes on the different career paths. And really the objective of today is to give you a better understanding of healthcare at Owen. We have the fortune of some current students on the call, as well as faculty and staff. And so really it's going to give you hopefully a lot of insight into the curriculum, as well as what employment looks like for internships and full-time roles, and how the recruiting process looks for those of you that are interested in healthcare. So for introduction's sake, the individuals on this screen are your Career Management Center team for the full-time MBA program students. My name is Sandy Cannett, and I am one of the MBA coaches that works specifically with students interested in healthcare. I also have other focus areas, which are operations and HOP. But so I am working as the career coach for those of you that are pursuing internships or full-time roles within the healthcare space. And I will let my colleague Emma introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It is great to see some familiar names here and new names. My name is Emma Duncliffe, and I am the employer relations point person for all healthcare specific roles. And that means while Sandy is working on the coaching side of the house, I am working with all of our employer partners, helping them create a recruiting strategy and facilitating all of their on-campus and virtual programming that they utilize to get to know all of you. So very happy to be here and excited to dive into things today.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. As I mentioned, we have a couple of our faculty on the call as well that specifically focus in healthcare. So I will let them introduce themselves as well. Ranga or Birch, if you want to kick it off.
Okay, I can go first. Hey, I welcome everyone. My name is Ranga Ramanujam. I'm a faculty member at Owen. I wear two hats. I'm a member of the healthcare management part of the academia. I also have a secondary appointment in the Department of Health Policy. And I also teach courses in organization studies. And I recently became the faculty director this past December. And I'm really excited about the various opportunities available to us to enhance our curriculum, enrich the student experience, and create opportunities for placement. I'll be happy to take questions. But a quick note, my research, I not only teach, but I also do research. My research is on accidents and mistakes in healthcare. So I study medical errors. In particular, my research is about how physicians, medical residents, and nurses talk about, or more often choose to remain silent about, mistakes that can kill patients. So I've been studying that for about 20 years in multiple settings, including Indiana and New York, Tennessee, and California. Birch?
Yeah. Hello, welcome. I'm Birch Wood. I'm the Director of Healthcare Programs here at Owen. I'm an Owen alum. I went here several years ago, and I have worked in healthcare most of my career before coming back to be Director of Healthcare here. I worked at HCA for nearly a decade, then worked at VUMC at the hospital here, and then also at LifePoint Health. So I've had a lot of time in the industry, as well as get to run a couple of programs here, both the Healthcare MBA and the Master of Management in Healthcare, which is a lot of fun. And I look forward to meeting all of you in the fall.
Great. Thank you. We also, as I mentioned, have two current students on the call as well, Zach Terry and Caitlin Osborne. And this slide shows the entire Vanderbilt Business Healthcare Association team, which is the professional club that those of you that are going to be interested in healthcare would join. And so Zach, I'll let you kick it off with your introduction.
That sounds great. Thanks, Sandy. Well, welcome everybody. Super excited to be here. My name is Zach Terry. This summer, I'm at Johnson & Johnson, a part of their MBA FLDP program summer internship. Specifically, I'm on the acquisitions and divestitures operations team. And I think there might be a section later on in this call for us to go a little bit more in depth into what we're working on this summer. So I'll leave it at that. But super excited that you're here. I think you're making a great decision with Vanderbilt and an even better decision with healthcare at Vanderbilt. So excited to talk through that today. And with that, I'll pass it over to Caitlin.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. Glad to see everyone here. I'm Caitlin Osborne. This summer, I am interning at Medtronic in their global renal denervation team, which is part of their cardiology portfolio. I am on their market development team working on developing a plan, a marketing plan for them. So it's been just a couple weeks, but great so far. I do come from a healthcare background, so I was an occupational therapist for 8 years, primarily in the pediatric space. I think you'll meet a few people within VBHA who have a healthcare background, but even if you don't, there's so many students who also don't. So we welcome everybody. It is a great team to be a part of. We have a lot of great events. So I think you guys will enjoy being part of the club if you are interested in joining.
Awesome. Okay, so we have about 45 minutes or so to talk through the agenda today. We're going to go over the healthcare curriculum. Ranga and Burge are going to speak more in depth about that because I think some of you, like Caitlin mentioned, might be coming in with a healthcare background and looking to stay within the industry. And some of you may be coming from a non-healthcare background. And so they're going to highlight the aspects of the curriculum that will help you learn more about the industry. We'll also talk about a healthcare career overview, what employment looks like for Owen students going into roles within healthcare. Emma's going to cover what the recruiting timeline looks like so that you have a sense of when things start to happen in terms of healthcare recruiting and when you would need to be prepared to interview for summer internships within healthcare. And then Zach and Caitlin are going to talk about what their experience was like recruiting and what the time commitment is like when you're balancing academics as well as career management. We'll go over some next steps. And then because we have so much healthcare intellectual capital on the call, we will hold all the questions until the end so that you can ask Ranga, Birch, Caitlin, Zach, me, or Emma any questions that you have after we go through the slides. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ranga and Birch to talk a little bit about the healthcare concentration at Owen.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. I'll give you a quick overview. First of all, I will say that we are very proud of a curriculum. This is something that Larry Van Horn, who used to run the program, carefully put together several years ago. It's continued to evolve. But what we try to do is make sure that the students have an opportunity to get exposed to content that provides a broad overview of various facets of healthcare management. But we also make sure that you get to hear from faculty who are not just academics only, but we also hear from practicing managers, healthcare leaders. And we also try to make sure that these are not just abstract theoretical courses, that they give you opportunities for you to gain hands-on experience. So that's a quick overview of our philosophy. Just make sure that your experience of taking courses and going to the healthcare concentration exposes you to content, to people, and to experiences. When it comes to the logistics of what you need to do to get a healthcare concentration, I want to provide a quick overview, but can take questions later. At a simplest level, you got to do 12 credits worth of courses from this list of courses. This is a sample list, and we might increase the number of courses depending on the availability of interest and faculty. But the idea is and most of these courses are typically 2-credit courses. We might occasionally have 1-credit courses. So to put it very simply, you enroll in 6 2-credit courses, you get a concentration. Additionally, starting this year, and I want to reiterate that since I took over as the faculty director this past December, we are in the process of taking a whole new look at a curriculum and tweaking it and revising it. And one of the many changes we hope to make is to basically make a couple of courses required over your 2 years. One is a course on healthcare economics and policy, which provides an overview of the healthcare landscape. And the other is a healthcare immersion, about which I'm going to get Birch to say a lot more about. But the idea is we want to make sure that everyone, with or without prior healthcare experience coming into the program, gets an opportunity to look at the healthcare policy landscape. So much of healthcare management is embedded in a broader context of policy, so this course is important. I have also included the words or equivalent because if you, for example, already have a policy background, if you already have met those requirements, you can always talk with me because our goal is to make it flexible. But overall, we would expect everyone to take this course over the 2 years. And the other is to engage in an immersive activity. One of our high points of a curriculum offering that Birch is intimately familiar with and is going to talk about is our healthcare immersion. And the idea is to give you a very hands-on embedded experience with the process of healthcare delivery. So that's the broad overview. Again, if you have any questions, I can always take them on later. But let me turn it to Bert so that he can say more about the immersion.
Thanks, Ranga. The immersion is important, as you heard Ranga mention a couple of times, and I'll stress it as well. It's important to us that you not only get the didactic learning from the classroom, but that you actually spend time in healthcare. This is especially important for those who have never been in healthcare before, don't have that healthcare background, so they can get exposed to what healthcare looks like in a lot of different ways. And the first way that we do that at Owen is through the healthcare immersion class. It happens in the mid-mod between mods 1 and 2 in the fall. And what we try to do that course is to put you in front of a lot of different things in healthcare so you can see what healthcare looks like. It's a pretty broad industry. There's lots of things you can do. You've already heard from Zach and Caitlin doing various things in healthcare, and you'll see as we go on through these slides that there's lots of places you can go in healthcare, from consulting to marketing to strategy to operations, and all across the board. And so we like to put you in healthcare immersion to show you all those things, to help you decide sort of where you want to be in healthcare, and to give you a look at some of the people who are important in healthcare. We try to bring some speakers in and some leaders of organizations in to help you understand what people are thinking about in the field of healthcare and how that might change going forward. But healthcare immersion is a very fun class. It's a 4 or 5 day class. We run you from daylight to dark. We have you spend a day in an OR. We have you spend a day on a clinic. We have you spend an evening in an ER or in an ICU unit, typically PICU. And then we also have you go through various things. Sometimes we're lucky enough to get a bird, the helicopter here, and helicopter transport. We had that last year, which was awesome. We try to take you out to some clinics in town. We try to find some other organizations and that are open and available for us to come through and see their space in the area. Healthcare is a huge part of the Nashville landscape. I think now it's something like 21 companies, publicly traded companies, headquartered here in healthcare. 1 in every 6 hospital beds is located here in is headquartered here in Nashville. And there's tons of stuff around that. So we like to get you out and in the area and get you immersed in healthcare, as well as learn all the things about healthcare. And I'll turn it back over to Sandy and Emma.
Thank you. So as Birch mentioned, healthcare is obviously a very broad industry. And so this is sort of a way that I think is helpful for students not coming from a healthcare background to think about the industry as a whole. So you have, your care delivery, your providers in terms of those providing care to patients across a number of different diseases or treatments. So those of you that are interested in that space, we have employers that recruit our MBA students as from the provider space. There's also corporate healthcare. So those are going to be your big pharmaceutical companies. A lot of the corporate healthcare companies have leadership development programs, which are very appealing for MBA students because they're putting you in a structured program. Zach is in one now, as is Caitlin. And so they can talk a little bit more about LDPs, but you can look through sort of the corporate side is also going to be your large insurance companies as well. And then you have, sort of the healthcare consulting, which is also an area that we have employers looking for ON MBAs in the healthcare consulting space. The main thing that I would sort of speak to as well is like within the industry, it's still important to think about what functional area you're going to be pursuing. So you are still going to have a function expertise. And so you're still going to be a finance MBA, marketing, operations, strategy, general management. And I would say too, and Caitlin and Zach can talk about this from their recruiting experience, you don't necessarily have to choose one aspect of the industry in order to go about your internship recruiting strategy. You can consider the industry as a whole and adapt your sort of interview process according to which aspect of the industry you're engaging with in the employer. Some students are very specific about what area within healthcare they want to pursue. So they may only want to work for providers. And so it's really a personal decision and an individual decision of where you see yourself within such a large, complex industry. But again, kind of that functional expertise is something that you're still going to have regardless of where you end up in terms of care delivery, corporate, or the consulting side. This is what ON employment looks like in healthcare. So the class of 2023, 12% of students went into healthcare in the industry. And then I thought it would be interesting to show kind of as a pull through from the previous slide that we do have students across all of those different buckets within healthcare. So as you can see, the full-time graduates of the class of 2024 are in payers, they're in pharmaceutical companies, they're in providers with the Vanderbilt Center for Technology Transfer and Commercialization. So really a very wide variety of employers that you see our students getting hired into. And then Caitlin and Zach's class have the same thing. They have classmates that are all across the industry in different types of roles. And again, that functional diversity you'll see too across all of these different companies. So really exciting from a recruiting standpoint of view as a student, because you do have exposure to a lot of different types of employers, and we can answer more questions about that specifically when we get to the end. So Emma's going to talk a little bit about what the recruiting timeline looks like for students that are recruiting for their internship within healthcare. So Emma, I'll pass it off to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. So obviously, here we are in the summer. We are starting off with career exploration and really just getting a taste of what it means to be in healthcare or any of the other industries that we are holding prep sessions for. Maybe some of you, like Caitlin mentioned earlier, are coming from a healthcare background. Maybe some of you have zero experience, but you know that this is where you might want to pivot. And that's okay. At this point in time, that's a great place to be, exploring lots of different options and areas, and really coming into the school year with an open mind. As we get later into the summer, you'll begin meeting with your CMC career coach, Sandy, and start working on resume reviews and, tailoring your resume and making sure that it is in the best shape possible to head into recruiting. And what we mean when we say recruiting events begin, and that's in September, the date to mark your calendar with is September 3rd. That's the Tuesday after Labor Day. And what we mean by that is when companies will begin having a presence on campus, in the building at Owen, virtually, and that means that you want to be prepared to have conversations with alumni, recruiters at any point in time throughout your day. You never really know if someone is going to pop in. We try to communicate as best as possible. We send a weekly email, and as well as have events on 12/20, which many of you have likely already logged into to access this session. If you have not gotten yourself on 12/20 and somehow landed in this session, please reach out to us and we can help you get onto 12/20 and make sure you have access to all of the things going on this summer. Moving from September into October, as Birch talked about, healthcare immersion, that is when that takes place. That is during the fall break period. I think that's an important, it has been in years past. Birch, if it is any different, correct me if I am wrong, but I think that that's just important to call out because sometimes fall break sounds like, woohoo, we have no school. And then you start making these plans and then it's going to overlap with healthcare immersion. So make sure your calendar is clear for that. And September and October is also when National Career Fairs happen. So these are held for a variety of different identities. There's National Black, Ramba, Prispanica, Forte is happening in just a couple of weeks in Chicago for women. And these are other great recruiting opportunities outside of the employers that are on campus. So some people use those as first exposure, like start having conversations. It can be overwhelming going up to random companies at booths and just striking up a conversation and networking, but it really is a good way to get some practice and expand your network. And all while this is all going on, and I will ask Caitlin and Zach to talk about juggling all of this in a minute, but applications and jobs are going to start opening. So you're going to be on 12/20 every single day, and you're going to be looking at all of the opportunities available, as well as likely conducting your own search outside of 12/20 and outside of opportunities at Owen. And so all while you're networking and recruiting and attending events on campus, you're also going to be actually applying for roles. And applications are anywhere from September into February, March, April. Things are definitely skewing a bit later, and we'll see things open through the spring. And interviews will likely begin end of the fall into right after winter break. Usually right after winter break is when things really pick up. So I would also say scheduling wise, plan to be back on campus and in Nashville pretty soon after your winter break, because things pick up really quickly after that. And then I will, if Sandy, you could go to the next slide. Thinking a little bit about what we mean when we say recruiting and what recruiting is happening on campus. This is what we mean. So there are company info sessions that take place during the lunch hour, as well as in the evening. And this will be an opportunity for you to interface in person or virtually with companies that are interested in recruiting talent at Owen. Often, in addition to a company presentation or an information session, there will be an opportunity to chat one-on-one. We call it a coffee chat with an employer, and have 15 to 30 minutes with them, able to answer specific questions and begin networking. And I am going to turn it over to Caitlin and Zach to talk a little bit about this breakdown, because some of these numbers can seem a little overwhelming, but I'd love for them to touch on just what recruiting looked like for them and how balancing everything going on, how did that work for you both?
Absolutely. Caitlin, do you want to go first, or do you
No,
have
go ahead. I'll jump in after you.
Okay. So I would say that my recruiting experience was a bit atypical. And thinking about that timeline that was just shared a slide or two ago, I would say that is typical of what you will probably experience where you will be interviewing in January, February, March. With J&J, I interviewed and had the offer by late November. It was the week before Thanksgiving. So I want to start with that just to call out that my experience will be a bit atypical when I'm talking about all of this. What I will say is that from a balancing perspective, my gut tells me is that it won't get easier. And in fact, my mod 3 from a class load perspective was more challenging and more work than a mod 2 or than my mod 2 class schedule. And so it actually worked out well for me. I think a couple of things that I would call out from just a balancing perspective to think about and to potentially take advantage of is during year one, you will have the opportunity in one of the 4 mods to take 3 classes. I know it's very popular for healthcare students to do that in mod 3 because that's when a lot of those interviews are landing. So I know it can be overwhelming to look at these numbers, but try and keep in mind that you are not without support. I mean, we've got a great support network on the faculty side with Birch and Ranga, also with Sandy and Emma. And then also just being able to tweak your class schedule as needed. And then the last thing that I'll say before I turn it over to Caitlin for her experience is just that I would highly encourage you to just be as proactive as possible. I would say that I have particularly or a particular tendency to avoid procrastination myself. But I would say that will really benefit you in business school because you don't want it to be Thursday and you're scheduling an interview and you've got a group project due that night and your piece isn't done. So I would just try and be as proactive as possible with your other obligations so that you can prioritize those interviews. Because I no disrespect to our faculty members on the call, sorry, Ranga, but I think it's understandable if your priority is the interviews and landing that internship. And so you just want to be able to put yourself in a position to prioritize those when you start to land them. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Caitlin.
Yeah, so my timeline was a little bit more typical. So my first interview was in December, but then the rest of them were in January. And they started, I want to say I actually had some over Christmas break, like before we started back in January. So hit the ground running, like I think it was like January 3rd or 4th kind of thing. It was like very early when mine started. So um, as far as balancing everything goes, I think I've heard the sentiment a couple times of you have to balance school, recruiting, and your social life, and you can pick 2 to prioritize. And so for me, I really prioritized recruiting. I would say that as far as classes go, I didn't put them on the back burner, but I made sure that like when I was in class, I was really paying attention. So that way I could try to get as much out of class as I could when I was in there and didn't have to spend as much time as I needed, or, I didn't have to spend as much time outside of class as maybe I could have, because I was really trying to get all of those like key takeaways while I was in there. Because additionally, I have a family at home. I've got a toddler, so that part of my social life is very important. So definitely at the beginning, I really just focused, I would say like August, September, I did a lot of just coffee chats, really trying to narrow down what I was interested in, what companies I really wanted to target, and then moving more into the fall, once I knew I was really targeting med tech and pharma companies, like really just focusing on coffee chats with people at those companies, with alumni at those companies, that I was really interested in. And then, like I said, December, January kind of jumped into the actual interview season. And then, as Zach mentioned, I took 3 classes, mod 3, which for me was great. I think it's pretty common to do that either mod 2 or mod 3. And for me, doing it during actual interview season was really helpful because I could spend a lot of time with Sandy, like during, like going to the CMC, doing prep for my interviews. I also reached out to alumni to practice those interviews really make sure that all my answers were buttoned up and ready to go.
Thank you. And I want to also call out to Zach's point of some companies operate outside of this timeline, and that's something that is important to call out because we don't want anyone thinking like, oh my gosh, recruiting started on September 3rd at Owen. Why on August 10th, I missed out on something. There are companies that we might not have relationships with. And if you are ever looking at other companies, other postings, and you want help kind of navigating other timelines, Sandy and myself are always here to like walk through that, see if we can get in touch with someone, if we have an alum at the company. We're always happy to help with that too. So if things don't fall exactly in this timeline, this is very loose. So it's important to call out.
Right. And I think, yeah, it's just kind of being adaptable and knowing that things can shift and being, proactive about reading all your communications and when dates change or deadlines change. But yes, to Emma's point, sometimes employers go outside of the recruiting process, but we're here to help you with any of those scenarios. So this is just sort of to wrap up before we move to the Q&A part. Main things to do right now is get your resume into the Owen format so that we can go ahead and have a resume review, and that part of the process is done for you so that you can focus a little bit more in Mod 1, getting acclimated to the Owen community and your classes and your group work. It starts to get really busy really fast. So I think this would be something that I would try to work through this summer is the MBA guide for incoming for 2026. And a lot of you have already done your resume review, which is awesome. As Emma mentioned, the resume will be submitted to 1220 and released to employers on September 3rd as you're kind of tracking towards that date. And this is just some screenshots of how you would set up your appointments and your profile. If you are interested in healthcare, make sure that you note that on your career preferences in your 1220 profile, because I will be using that to match you with a second-year peer coach. And yeah, just to kind of summarize some advice, you all are doing a great job by attending the career exploration series that we're doing to understand what different careers look like. Now's the time to do that. As I mentioned, completing a resume review with a Career Management Center coach would be a great deliverable to take care of this summer. And then really starting to use some of the resources that we have in 1220. I know it's a lot of information and a lot of resources to sift through. And that's another thing that you can talk to your coach about, is just some direction within all of those resources, what to focus on. But tons of information about LinkedIn and exploring different MBA career paths and employment outcomes for our students for the last 5 years, which can help you start thinking through what employers typically partner with Owen to recruit MBAs into their organization. And in our coaching session, we'll start to talk about transferable skills as well. So start early, be prepared, and be adaptable, as we were just talking about, because things start to move really fast and you just have to be ready to go. So with that, I am going to open it up for questions so that you all can take advantage of this time to ask whatever is on your mind, whether it's recruiting related, curriculum related, related to anything regarding the CMC. So feel free to take yourself off of mute or put questions in the chat. Emma is going to moderate that for us.
Sandy, while this gets started, if maybe I could add just a couple of of other thoughts or ideas.
I'd love
So,
that. Thank
so the
you.
first one, yeah, no problem. So the first one is just emphasizing 12/20. My recommendation is I would highly recommend getting in the habit of checking 12/20 every day, or if not every day, every other day, even just 5 or 10 minutes of like, what are the new postings? That was something that I found really helpful, and just a good idea of getting a handle on what's out there and what's becoming available, and general timelines and things like that. And then the other thing that I would touch on is actually a great point that Caitlin brought up, which is this idea of really being intentional with what you're interested in. So I don't know how it was for many of you, but for me, it was like MBA applications was like, you have to be super specific about where you want to go, how you want to use the MBA, and then you get admitted, and your first day is like, this is a great time to explore, and it's like whiplash. And so like so many things, I think for me, the real answer is somewhere in the middle, where yes, be adaptable, but also I would take this time to start to shape up maybe what you think you might be interested in. Just because those timelines can move somewhat quickly, it gives you the confidence to say yes or say no when those initial offers are coming through. So I'll pause there since questions are starting to come in, but just a couple of additional thoughts.
Thanks, Zach.
Zach. Yes, we have 2 questions in the chat. Does healthcare immersion happen at the same time as the consulting track? Typically, yes. And Birch, last year, I believe there was overlap there. Were there people that did immersion start last year on Friday night? Is that correct?
Oh, I'm trying to remember. Zach and Caitlin might remember better than I do, but I think it did.
So if that is the case, then there is a possibility of being able to, the consulting track is typically like Thursday and then Friday. And depending on how fast you're getting yourself back to Nashville, but we can talk specifics if that ends up being a conflict. There's a lot you'll learn. There's a lot that goes on that weekend. It's also the timing of the finance trek to New York. So there's a lot. We all capitalize on you all not being in class. So we can talk specifics.
On immersion, I remember not having a whole lot of additional time for things outside of immersion. And so if you're deciding between the 2 or 3, probably want to start to operate under the assumption that it is primarily just being able to choose and attend one. And just because I'm sitting at the intersection of finance and healthcare, I'll speak to that very briefly. I would encourage you to choose the healthcare one. I just learned so much from immersion, and also my experience with being in a healthcare and finance role is that the finance track was, from what I heard, a lot of investment banking, which is a phenomenal experience. I mean, don't get me wrong, but it's not typical of what you would probably do in a corporate finance role at a healthcare company. And it just gives you so much to talk about in interviews if you attend the immersion.
Yeah, I'll
Jump in
second
real
that.
quick
And
too. So immersion, it was all day Thursday, all day Friday, and then also Monday as well. And that might have just been because of how the fall break fell, but yeah, it was packed days from first thing in the morning through dinner time and even after. So I think it would be really difficult probably to do both. And I think it would be really great to do immersion your first year, but correct me if I'm wrong that you could still do it your second year, if you can't make it happen in your first year. I think there are some of our classmates who are planning on doing it next year, but correct me if that's not right.
that's correct.
Other questions, and these are kind of in similar veins. Is it possible to explore and pursue healthcare while also recruiting for consulting? So you are going to see a lot of your classmates try to juggle a lot of different things at once. And for some people, that is possible. And that means having to, as Caitlin was talking about, prioritization, you're letting things go in other areas. This is going to totally depend on your ability to manage your own time and manage your own priorities. I would say it is possible, and there are a lot of people that do it, but it is not without a lot of hard work and time commitment. Both consulting and healthcare can be time intensive, and both include their own nuances in networking and connecting with employers. And so if you are able to dedicate yourself to both of those, that's great. But I would say that if you see what is coming down the line and it's like, okay, this is a lot, this is a lot to take on, it is better that you focus on one thing fully and completely and dive into that than to do both of those things at a half capacity, would be my advice, because both of these things are time intensive and you want to be putting your best foot forward and giving yourself the best shot at opportunities. And I don't think that will happen if you're one foot in one world and one foot in another. But I will also let Sandy and Caitlin and Zach speak to that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think that, the consulting is going to be super intensive from a case prep standpoint of view, and the Owen Strategy and Consulting Club has a whole program that they run students through for the consulting prep, and it's super time intensive. And then you have like the healthcare kind of immersion conflict. I will say that, consulting's going to have like a pretty predictable recruiting process, and there is no like, you're definitely still open and able to apply to healthcare positions simultaneously. So it's not like you're restricted if you're recruiting for consulting, that you can't still also be applying for roles within a healthcare leadership development program or something like that. I'll take this next question, which is from Jack. Is there a function that has historically been most beneficial for healthcare? I really would say no. I've seen students across all different functions end up within the healthcare industry because the healthcare industry is so broad. One of the resources that's really helpful if you want that historical look at where students have ended up within healthcare is the employment list by student name, and it's located in the resource library within that folder for your class, the 2026 class. And it's in the section for exploring MBA career paths. I usually tell all of the students that I'm meeting with to take a look at that list so that you can see, from the past 5 years, who's ended up in healthcare, what areas within healthcare, what function, but I wouldn't say that one function typically dominates in terms of employment. But great question. Thank you.
Sandy, can I just add to what you said?
Please. Yes.
Certainly. So I think that's an important question, and I want to at least suggest a way of thinking about it. So one thing to think about is, why do you want to be in healthcare studying out of a business school? And I think the answer really is healthcare needs the application of management principles to enhance effectiveness. There are huge opportunities for that industry to benefit from people putting on their management hat coming in. And that really means management is multifaceted. There are opportunities to use finance when it comes to costing and capital structuring. Operations inefficiencies abound, so using operations. If you look at this labor shortage, there is huge need for leadership development. There is need for HOP. Technology, I don't have to tell you more. But the idea is healthcare is not just the largest sector, it's also the one with the most number of challenges, which is to say opportunities. And I would strongly suggest that you should stick to your strengths as in what is the functional expertise that works best for you, gives you a chance to contribute, and then see how that's aligned with any particular sector of healthcare.
And I can say, speaking from looking at students in the past, we really have had someone in all of the fields, and they've all been placed in various fields. So it's not there's not one that's been more beneficial than the other. They're all equally important, as Ranga says, in healthcare.
I wanted to ask Zach and Caitlin, could you talk a little bit about other resources that outside of 1220 that you utilize during just your exploration and job search?
Yeah, I could
Yeah.
jump into that. So I would say the number one thing that I used outside of 1220 was LinkedIn and just word of mouth connection. So asking during coffee chats, like, who should I talk to? Like, who else you think is really knowledgeable on this? I think somebody showed me over the summer before we started how on LinkedIn, how you can go to the Vanderbilt site or to an actual like company site and find people who are from Vanderbilt, excuse me. And so that was super helpful as a way to connect. Most people who are Owen grads, I found, are really quick to respond and are happy to meet for a coffee chat. So that was a great way to get started. And then just second years as well, like especially at the beginning, connecting me to other second years, connecting me to people who had just graduated. So yeah, definitely the community of people would be, I think, the strongest resource.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add other than sharing my own personal experience that Owen alums really are the best resource. So I didn't know that I wanted to be, so I knew I wanted healthcare, and I knew I wanted a leadership development program this time last year when I was in your shoes, but I didn't know finance, general management. And so I actually connected with a couple of Owen alums who are a couple of years older than myself and Caitlin, and asked them about their experience because they were in healthcare LDPs. One in particular that was particularly influential was in a finance LDP, and really helped me polish what I was interested in, and really firm up that, you know, finance was the way I wanted to head, at least for this summer. So I would highly recommend other Owen alums.
And let me add something that is probably one of the most important things you can start doing in healthcare. It is a relationship-driven industry, and so you can never start networking early enough. And using those contacts, alumni are happy to meet with you. CEOs of corporations will make time for you as a student. Go out there and meet those people and start having conversations about what they do and learn more about the industry that way. You can never network too early. You can never network too much. And this field in particular leads itself to that. And so, yeah, get out there, use LinkedIn, use our alumni resources, come to talk to other students in the field, talk to me and Sandy and Emma. We're happy to connect you with people. I'm happy to make connections at organizations. A good site, if you're not familiar with a lot of companies in healthcare, is the Nashville Healthcare Council. Has a big list of healthcare companies that can help you sort of look and see what's in the space. And yeah, I'll let you go to the next question.
Thank you, Birch. Yeah, Nashville Healthcare Council is a great resource as well. Zach, I wanted to ask if you could tackle this question. Thinking about recruiting for an FLDP, do you think, from your experience, recruiting in the finance space or recruiting in the healthcare space is a better move?
I think that's an interesting question. My recommendation would be first to answer the question of how important is being in healthcare to you, and if healthcare is where you want to be. Having an FLDP in tech is probably not going to lead you to where you want to end up. And so I would highly recommend having a focus on healthcare and targeting the companies that have an FLDP. And maybe if you want to expand that search a little bit, you could even go healthcare, LDP, and then use one of your rotations for a finance specific role, finance adjacent role. But off the top of my head, companies that have a very strong healthcare FLDP at the MBA level is Cigna, which is a great partner for Vanderbilt. So look at them, and Johnson & Johnson, of course. Those are the big two off the top of my head that are within healthcare that have FLDPs specifically. So just something to keep in mind as you're heading into the school year.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. Well, I think that we are we a little bit over time? I think so.
We're good on time. Wrapping
We're
up.
good on time if you all have any other questions. One thing that I thought would be interesting, Caitlin, you came into the program having had a healthcare background, but you wanted to stay within healthcare. Zach, you came in with a non-healthcare background and wanted to pivot into healthcare. Can you talk about what drew you to the industry and what kind of your passion is around the industry?
Absolutely. So just to share a little bit of background about myself that will help add some color to my answer. My professional background prior to Owen was in the retail space. So I did a couple of years at Target and then 2.5 years at Wayfair. And I remember like very clearly there was a day at Wayfair, it was a particularly long day. And I, had enjoyed the work itself at Wayfair, but I was thinking about the outcome and the impact of my work. And it was like, we sold a couch today for more expensive than Amazon, if I'm being truthful. And if I'm thinking about my career for the next 40, 50 years, for me personally, I wanted something that had a little bit more personal meaning. And I really want to stress the word personal because it's not my intention to disparage what anybody does to earn a living. Somebody has to work in the retail space. It's a valuable industry. That's not the point here. It's really just about what was going to give me that sense of personal satisfaction and meaning. I would say that was the biggest one, and then maybe a sub bullet beneath that. Ranga touched on healthcare being the largest industry in the U.S. And if you're not intimately aware of the size, it's about 20% of US GDP is on healthcare spending. And so it's an absolutely massive industry, but on top of being massive, it's also a necessary industry. So regardless of where economic conditions are heading or, the state of things, people are always going to need healthcare. And so it's as close to recession proof as you can get. And when I was at Wayfair, I went through 3 layoffs, and just seeing the impact that has on people really also informed me as like I was interested in an industry that had some stability. And then lastly, and sorry, I don't mean to drone on here, there's just a lot of reasons to love healthcare if you ask me. The last one is also what Ranga touched on, which is just the challenges that it presents. I mean, we're doing very interesting work and there's no shortage of things to improve, processes to improve, things to get better. And for me, that all wraps up into a very fascinating industry to be a part of.
Thank you. Caitlin, what about you? Staying in healthcare?
Yeah, definitely. So I came into the program definitely with the idea that I was interested in healthcare, but probably like a lot of you wanted to be really open to other opportunities. So I wasn't closed off from doing something other than healthcare, but I have enjoyed the aspects of like knowing that I'm making an impact on the world, knowing that I'm doing something good. Like I really have enjoyed that with my experience. So definitely was taking that into consideration. And then when I came into the program was thinking, okay, maybe healthcare, maybe consulting, like just wanted to be really open to whatever opportunities presented themselves. And for me, as I started meeting with second years and with alumni and hearing about what they were working on, the projects that they were doing, I just kept coming back to the ones that were the most interesting to me, the ones that I got excited about thinking of myself in that role were the healthcare ones. So it's just a exciting field to be in. There's so much room for disruption. There's so much room for growth within the field. So that's exciting. And then additionally, like what Zach mentioned, as far as, nowhere is recession proof, but healthcare is always going to be around and it's always going to be needed. So there is some sort of stability there, and a little bit of security there that you might not find in other industries. So yeah, I'm a big fan of healthcare.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you all for joining, and a big thank you to Caitlin and Zach, who are busy on their internships. We really appreciate you joining the call and providing your student perspective. And then Birch and Ranga, thank you so much for providing so much insight in terms of the industry as well as the curriculum that's so fantastic at Owen for healthcare. And don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We'll be uploading this recording on our CMC YouTube channel. And I'm looking forward to meeting all of you very, very soon. And thanks again.
Thank you.